The purpose of this meeting is to solicit public comment. At this time, I'll turn it over to Elizabeth. She'll give a presentation.
Well, and actually, I'll go ahead and start. So the reason that
Maybe just state the purpose of the public
Yep.
comment.
Sorry, one thing, hold on a second. So I'd like to keep everybody's public comments under 5 minutes if we could. There's a lot of turnout tonight, so we can just keep it brief. Thank
I
you.
will probably be maybe more than 5 minutes just to explain why we're here.
Oh, yeah, no.
So I'm Elizabeth Nance. I'm with Franklin County Industrial Development Corporation. You actually saw me last week. The purpose of this is we are doing a community, the village has approved the submission of an application for community development block grant, which was commonly called CDBG, so you'll be hearing that a lot tonight. The block grant is through the state. It is federal HUD funds, Housing and Urban Development funds through the state. We are asking that the town, I'm sorry, I should know better, I live in Swanton, that the village applies for $500,000. It is a grant, not a loan, that will then be used to purchase the Pearly Block of 366 Main Street, and some renovation costs. That would be what the $500,000 would cover. The application is due on September 7th, and the agency that will make the determination on whether or not to award those funds will be meeting on November 4th. So that's when we'll find out when the village, because the village is the applicant, FCIDC am writing the grant application for the village, just so we're clear.
And will be the property owner, right?
I'm sorry?
And will be the property owner.
And FCIDC will be the property owner for the foreseeable future, because the application will be for us to purchase that property. So part of the reason we're here is because a public hearing is required as part of the application process, because we want to know what the public is thinking and just to answer any questions that anybody has. So I'm happy to answer questions about the actual application, and Jim will be answering any questions about the project, because he's been volunteering for FCIDC because he's done some other work in Enosburg and in St. Albans, so he's well versed in a lot of the technical issues. So he'll be answering any questions on behalf of FCIDC about the actual project.
Did you guys have anything else that you wanted to share?
I have
some
copies of
floor
the site plans, the floor
Okay.
plans available if anybody wants to see them. There was I don't know if you put the most recent application online, the one that I'd sent on Thursday or Friday.
We didn't put it online. no.
Okay. So there is the application that was done on, I believe, let's see, I have it with me. That was done as of August 20th, is available for public. It is a kind of a living document until it's submitted, so I do have a copy as of, and you have the copy that was done as of August 26th. Most of what we're waiting for are attachment documents. So we have worked with, so I don't know if, I guess just for public information, we did receive funds to do the brownfield assessment. So if you may have seen the monitoring wells on the property, we're waiting for that report to come back, and that will tell us what, if any, corrective action we need to take on the property. That was funded through a state fund, so the village did not incur any cost to do the brownfield phase 1 or phase 2. I believe FCIDC covered the cost of phase 1, but phase 2 was covered by a state grant.
Maybe Elizabeth walk through some of the purposes
Okay.
within the building.
So, and I may turn that over
It's going
to
to be a
Jim.
mixed-use building.
Yes, you want to talk about the uses of the building?
Sure. It's important that the word current gets, in the record, if you will, because here's today's current plan, what we've been working on for a while, where we are so far. So once this grant comes out, then the FDIC board will make a decision whether to buy the building or not, because it's part of the whole financing package. And if they decide to move ahead, then FDIC will buy the building. They have an option on the building currently. That's consistent with whatever the community development block grant option is. They have a particular form they have to work with, so that's been done. We've run it through the historic preservation process, and that's been approved, what's called the Part 1. And then we have to go through 2 other elements, but they're relatively perfunctory at this point. As long as our drawings and sketches meet their standards, we'll do that. And what that does is allow us to access a fair amount of federal tax credits, money reimbursed. Once you've spent a bunch of money, you'll get tax credits back, and you'll work with your bank to get those. Then the current program for the building is this, is that there'll be 2 or 3 relatively small, meaning somewhere between 700 and 1,000 square feet retail spaces on the street side of the building. Then the vast majority of that first floor and what is the original building will be offices for the school district that has made a commitment to move into that space. So there's been a layout of those plans and office folks, and Morgan's over my left shoulder and can answer questions more specifically about them. But we've drawn up some preliminary plans for that. And then I'm gonna stay on the floors for a minute and then I'll go up. So the current warehouse is about 2,500 square feet, and we can eke out a little bit more. That's gonna become a 2-story structure. There'll be a full first floor and a full second floor. The full first floor is gonna be for a child care center. It'll be for 40 children, new positions and new jobs for those. Expecting to have somewhere between 14 and 16 staff to service that program. The second floor will become a big blank space. However, we've already had interest in office space on the second floor from a different organization. Tim is responsible for managing that, so I won't overspeak on that one. Elizabeth will have to help me tag team this one on the second floor. The current apartments that are there, there's 8 units there, 6 1s and 2 2s. And if this grant comes through, that has financial implications for what we can afford to do in the building. The apartments may stay just the way they are, if you will, and be rented out as they are now. And or we may end up reconfiguring that floor and modifying the apartments. Really won't know that until November is done and Tim makes decisions about how he wants that building to operate. The third floor, we're going back to that historic element. We have to apply for state tax credits, which are also a fairly significant windfall. We apply for those next July and they come out in July. When we follow that whole program, what that's going to mean is that all of the original windows will go back in. The round windows upstairs on the third floor, those are vents, those are windows that did this. Those will all go back in. We'll be installing a full sprinkler system in the whole building. We'll be installing a 3-story elevator in the rear of the building. From our perspective, it's a gut remodel. It'll, all the mechanicals, all the heating systems will all be redone, put back together, meet all the energy efficient standards that are here now. Insulation, all those things will be taken care of. They'll all be part of a group that goes through the whole thing. Current budget right now for construction is around $1.4, $1.5 million. Costs kind of all over the place. I think everybody kind of knows that. They're going up and down, but that's the ballpark of what would be spent on the building. We've had several meetings with the bunks, the landowners, which we abut, and others do as well. We met 2 weeks ago. And then from that, Tim has also been working with Notch, which are neighbors to the north. And right now, I want to say more than preliminarily, they suggested that we take the fence down and make one big parking lot back there. And that would also mean that we're shutting off what is now an unwritten driveway that runs through the middle of the Pearly Block property on the back over onto Archibald. That would be cut off. The fence line that would be filled in abuts Champlain Chevy, and then Champlain Chevy as well wants, and we're, by the way, it's fair to say they were here, that this is what we've talked about most recently and what they're expecting to see from us. And that there would also be a close off from the main street all the way through. So that parking lot back there would be a parking lot, a fenced in playground, that would sort of be its own thing, and access points would be coming in through the Notch. Which is already there. driveway's already there. We talked about paving the whole lot, putting it all back together, if you will, and putting it there. The, I think that's pretty factual, you know, pretty accurate, and now this is accurate and a push. From the very beginning, the premise with FDIC and also my work for them, volunteering for them, was that we needed to do whatever we could do to get a child care center in there and make it sustainable. So all of the budgets for the project, the operations budgets, I'm getting hit here.
You want me to move
No,
on?
no, that's all right, if I just do this, you're fine. All the budgets that'll end up going into this grant show that the child care center pays no expenses, pays no rent, pays no heat, pays no power. It's all covered in the overview of the whole building. And with the very clear point of having that money be able to go into managing the child care, but specifically towards staff salaries. I don't know if there's folks here from child care centers, but child care centers have a very difficult time keeping folks, and one of the reasons is the low pay and no benefits. And so what we're trying to do is, part of this project is to create a great child care center and also find ways for it to have more money and involved in it. And Pam, is Pam here yet?
No.
Okay, well then I'm assuming she's got a family issue and that's fine. So we've hired P.M. Fontaine, who used to run the YMCA child care in St. Albans, that closed. It was the project that was a program that was in the flood, and then they decided to close themselves down. So she's been working with us, helping us lay out a child care center programmatically, staff-wise, budgetarily, and make that put together. And as whenever we talk with anybody about the building, their ears perk up on the child care issue. And I think I'll stop in 1 second. And the last thing I would say is that Tim's board unanimously approved this and have put up $50,000 or $60,000 already in soft cost to try to get this thing to happen and to move ahead. And so his board, this is the first time any board like this has ever done it. They looked at it and they gave it 17 people voted yes to move ahead on something like this. So
And
I'll
just
stop
to
for
and just as a minor point of clarification, FCIDC is paying Pam Fontaine's salary. The village has not spent any money other than time, and your time is valuable, but FCIDC is paying Pam Fontaine, just for
And
clarification.
Tim is,
Tim Smith is the executive director of FCIDC.
Does that about sum it up? Ready to field some
Just start.
questions and comments? Ben, I saw your hand first.
Yeah, I'm just gonna do a little handout, just a quick graphic I made today. So this is what 30 spaces looks like on Main Street, parking spaces. I'm disappointed that Tim's not here since he's kind of like the owner of the building. Here you go. Sammy, you here?
I certainly do.
So that's just a count and an estimate, and you guys, anybody want to see it? I don't know what you guys here. Let's see, so,
I'll make a note.
yeah, if you pass it around. One. All right, so let's get right into the application, and you guys can take a look at that. So first of all, I just decided, I saw the public hearing, and I got this copy of the application from Elizabeth, and I know that it's a draft one, so to save filibustering time later about how different, but this is the one that's available that the public was barely able to get. And I had to get this because I specially requested from John. So at this time, there's no way the public knows any of this. You could go to the office and look at the thing. So this is a digital copy. Just let me go, okay? In this, I thought, well, I'll check this out. And the first thing I noticed was the timeline says that the building permit was submitted in July 2021. So I took a little time and I went down and talked to Jesse Woods so that I could see what had been submitted, so that I could start to think about how am I going to react to this. That's why you submit stuff to zoning, so the neighbors can see what's coming, right? So I went there to see what's coming, and Jesse, as of Thursday of last week, you can't see this because the is incomplete. So if you will mark through that on this application, it was not completed in July, and it's not completed today, right?
My office, what I've received so far as a zoning application is what I've received. Jim and myself had a conversation last week about, basically what my office does in situations like this is we ask for a zoning application, we want to see what we have for a scope of work, and then we go from there, whether it has to go before the DRB, what it has to take for hearings. And there's some information there that Jim and I went over that we need, some historic structure. Jim and I now are on the page and we're just waiting for site plan review information to be compiled together so we can present one to the public and present to the
So
DRB.
when did it, so how long would the public have had to see this before this hearing, Jesse?
Well, nothing has been submitted fully, so.
Oh, so it's still the case that this information is visible to the public? Because I went to your office and asked for it, and you said you couldn't give it to me because it's incomplete. I'm just telling you my tale. So that's what's happening there, right? So this timeline is incorrect. It did not get submitted in July. It did not, and the reason it didn't get submitted, let's get into it. So here's the thing, in this project, if this project depends upon easements or rights of way, please submit documents that have been secured or will be secured within 6 months. If not applicable, select not applicable. So it looks like we got not applicable.
That is incorrect.
Did you change it on us?
It is.
When did you change it?
Excuse me, you don't have to be belligerent. It says NA because that is an option.
Yes.
But in there would be something filled out, and since then, I have put that we are in the process of working, as Jim said, we're
Yes.
working with the properties to the north and the south on the easements.
So what will, the answer that goes to the state will be not applicable, but we're working on it?
No, because not applicable has not been selected. I know, but if it had a little check mark,
Okay.
it would say not applicable.
This is all we can know.
That's why I told you it's not very reader friendly, but that's the way it comes down, that's the only
Okay,
way to
so-
print it.
So let me just bust in for a second. So I have spoken with Champlain Chevrolet today, and they said, quote, "We're not giving any ground. There is no agreement with Jim. That's been going round and round. There's no agreement. They're standing their ground." And then they said, "Well, what's going to happen is this discussion that you've supposedly had with Notch." I called Pam Parsons today, executive director of Notch, today, and talked to her, and she said that she had a discussion with someone about this, and she told me what they had discussed. But she said she has certainly not agreed to anything and that she's reluctant to agree to anything. So to represent this is you've got these deals in the motion. These deals are dead. And you're here on this application, and you're the only way that this body and that the state body, which I know that this hearing is not important, that the trustees aren't going to listen to the merchants or the people of Enosburg. I know that we'll have to go to the state level and write letters, signed letters, to the people that this application is headed to. And the only way that any of you, or that the state knew about that there ain't no deal or these back channel deals, is because I'm telling you about it right now. And the only way the state is gonna know is that I will tell them. Otherwise, what you heard from them about the right-of-way issues is kind of just a smokescreen. And if this goes to the state and people who don't know the details about this, what are they going to think? The only way they're going to know is if I tell them. And so I don't think you've answered that question with the attempted negotiations, which we know, and I'm telling people now that I called the people today, and it's not going to come true. Okay, so.
You're coming up on 5 minutes.
Yeah, okay. So the current parking plan what is the parking plan? What is it? Where is it? How can we know anything about this? How are we having a public hearing based on hidden information? So the parking plan, when last we heard, was let them eat cake. They'll park at the Opera House, right? They'll park at the Opera House. And then there was a mod to that said they'll park at the Quincy. And then, so what's going to happen after 14 years of watching parking is that sadly, I love you, man, but all the employees of FNESU, the daycare employees, the 30 people you see on that thing, they're gonna park the closest they can to the door. And that's what it looks like. Just like when Notch pushed their employees to public parking, every morning, they pull up, they get their briefcase out, they go to their office, and at 5:30 they come back. And the parking looks like that. That's what 30 people looks like. So if they don't have any option to park, if their only option is the Opera House or the Quincy, that's what's gonna happen, and that's a disaster. If this is supposed to help us, if you're supposed to be helping us, then this is not helping us. The idea, the part of this application that says, oh, it's so good for everybody downtown. These 13 people, we have our own customers. We don't need your help to get customers. So what you're doing here is really hurting us. And I'm here, you think I'm here for the fun of it? People, I'm here to this my life's work. And there are merchants, Kirsten is here, there are people all over. The liquor store couldn't be here tonight, but there are people who are afraid of you, who know that you are an onslaught of bullshit that's coming to the village. Yes, okay. I guess I'm out of town, huh?
Yeah.
So I just came here this has been a closed loop. The trustees only speak to those who advocate for this project. You've never spoken to someone like me who's critical of the
I've
project.
been to a couple meetings.
That counts for you? These guys have been badgering you, taking you inside this closed loop over and over and over. And I'm just here to try to break that closed loop open and get some other thoughts in here, other people who aren't the paid advocates for this program, for this thing. So that's all I have to say. I had a lot more, like the daycare, the mysterious daycare that no one, there's no evidence that this exists. There's no business plan. There's nothing. We can't see it. So we just now got the name today of the consultant. That's the first time we've received a name about who's going to do the daycare, and she's not going to do the daycare. All right, well, guys, I know this doesn't matter, so we'll be making a long letter and merchants of Main Street, actual stakeholders, non-stakeholders, actual stakeholders, property owners, business owners, will be signing it, and we'll be back again to try to deal with this onslaught that we're going to have to face every day. We're going to have to deal with Tim Smith's tenants and Elizabeth tenants every day with the problems that they create. Tim can't even make it here tonight. You think we're going to call him in the
Had a
morning?
personal issue, or he would have been here.
Well, that's troubling, It's good that he's...
No, I'm sorry. You can say anything you want about me. You can say anything you want about Jim because we're here. I'm not going to let you denigrate Tim Smith, who's not here, because he had a family emergency
Okay,
that
well-
he had to go deal with, or else he would be here. So say what you want about me or Jim, but I will not let you denigrate Tim Smith while he's
All
not
right.
here.
Okay, I won't denigrate Tim Smith while he's not here.
Sam,
All right, then we're gonna field some other comments and questions. Susie?
I have a question. I've heard what Ben has to say, and I understand if that were the case, how it would be very alarming. But I'd like to hear from other merchants that if the parking was not as Ben portrays it, if the parking was a resolved issue, are there other complaints or issues with the project if the parking was a resolved issue? I'm just curious.
Like the first proposal that we heard tonight, something similar to that?
Yes. I mean,
I guess that's a question for the public, that's why we're
If the
here.
parking wasn't an issue, would you have a problem with the project?
I don't have a problem with the project. I think it's great that something good's going to be happening with that building. I'm excited about that. But I am very worried about the parking, because even without that, sometimes we'll get someone who parks in front of our store for hours and just, that we don't have very many parking spaces in front there. And there are going to be a lot of extra employees in this building, and I am concerned that they will be taking up some of our retail parking spaces.
So
So
parking-
that is a concern for me. The actual projects going into the building, I'm excited about that, but parking is an issue for us.
Marco, if parking were not, if that was resolved,
Susie, can you not channel their comments for them? Just let them comment
I
for
want to
you.
hear something other than parking, so I'm trying to find out.
Yeah.
Well, I just had a
You're-
question.
You're an advocate and you're channeling their comments for them. So please, you've already had, do you get to speak every time for every person
Yeah.
and make them say what you want them to say? Please stop.
then this is an open
I
discussion.
have a question about the childcare. Is there a great need for 40 children in Enosburg right now? It is like a,
I mean, from Rhonda,
It's a-
because I know that there's already the one,
she says that she's turning people away.
that she's turning people away and that there is a true need for that, because it just seems really big. It seems really big.
I know that I recently have had to look for childcare over this past summer, and I called 15 places in Franklin County to get my 2 kids in anywhere. And
So-
I have another friend that's in the same situation right now.
For me, my biggest thing would be ask someone who has a child care mom. Where are these children being dropped off with the right of way, with the, with the traffic? 40 children feels like a school, right? That's a big school, and I know the elementary school has a very specific, you go in, you go out this way. I think that's a big picture that people are gonna need to see. So for me, that's just another
If I
mom.
can, just having had my child at a daycare center recently, they don't all get dropped off at the same time. It's so staggered that it's maybe like 3 parents at a time dropping a child off. So it's not quite the same as like what school looks like.
Is it possible within the parking spaces, because I know parking isn't an issue, is it possible, like in front of Wood Meadow, in front of Flying Disc, to have those as designated spaces for those businesses?
Or like a timed parking spot, kind of?
Can I address that? I mean, how would it be enforced? Who's gonna enforce it? Because like when we were in St. Albans, it was a time limit, but if nobody's enforcing it, then it would.
Jump.
To answer your question, Shauna, if you did that, it wouldn't really be public parking anymore. What you'd be doing is giving up public space and giving it to a specific business, and that's not public parking. That's not the way public parking works. Public parking is for everybody,
Right.
regardless of, what business they're going into. It's shared space for the public.
The devil's advocate, John, don't you have timed parking along School Street by the park?
Yeah, but that's time parking. That's still,
what she said.
it's still public.
No.
Well, I thought her original question, she was asking,
That
can
was
we
the original
designate
question.
spaces for specific
And then
businesses?
she said, like, doing timed parking.
That was, I said that.
Yeah,
Okay.
Sam did,
I was
but
asking
I
for
mean, if that
clarification.
was a solution, like if there was a way to somehow prohibit employees and so on and so forth, people that are not there to shop on Main Street from parking there. And
So-
I see what you're saying about how do you enforce it?
Yeah.
Well, we do hire local law enforcement to do that. I know
Have you
our-
ever had it reinforced any parking rules in Enosburg before?
Have we had to?
On Main?
I'm not aware.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
But that would be a
it's-
problem
it's-
if there's.
It's rare.
that's thin sauce.
It's very rare.
I used to have an antique shop in Main Street, St. Albans, 40 years ago, and Monday to Friday, there was 42 South Main Street, no business unless they were walking business, because everybody working in all the buildings needed parking in Main Street. So then they changed it to 2 hours, and they did enforce it, and that helped. They have to have at least one person, they have to pay. But then, when I moved to Richford, I thought, oh, this is gonna be great, but then the superintendent's office is open across the street. And, no, it was Customs, the Border Patrol, and that wasn't a problem, we parked at the back of their building. So when the superintendent's office opened, all of a sudden, whenever there was a meeting, I said, well, I may not even open my door today, because there is one space on Main Street, right beside my door, at the side, that people have to walk, from where the grocery store parking is to even come. So there's no business. And now I'm on Main Street in Enosburg, I feel that it's happening again. There's only one space in front of my little place, but people do come from, in the other spots. There's a hairdresser and the bank and everything, and a lot of people are just there 10, 15 minutes. But you can't get those spaces up. You just can't.
I think anytime you have a condensed downtown or urban setting, parking is gonna be one of the most valuable uses of land, so,
Yeah.
for sure. Any other questions? Well,
I just have a comment. I live 7 miles from downtown. I sometimes come into town twice a day. And I have never, that I can remember, not been able to find a parking place on Main Street. I don't, maybe a survey, some way of determining just how difficult this is. And I sense there's agreement here that parking is an issue. Everybody, if we're all in this together, we'd all be wanting to get an investment that's going to improve our downtown and figure out the one problem that's sticking out. And there's work going on it, but it hasn't been resolved yet. But it would seem to me that's what we ought to be talking about, how we're going to get the parking we need to satisfy what appears to be some of the emergencies.
So, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Ward, I think that, like, I don't think we're complaining about parking as it is now.
Okay.
You know, like, it's not terrible, and you can come twice a day and find a parking place, and that's what we want to keep. Is that people, you know, like, almost all the businesses downtown are, 15 minutes or less. Like, people pop in, pop out, and then that's really what we want. I mean, that's what we want, you know, is that people don't quit coming to downtown because they can't find parking.
Would it be possible to have designated parking for people that work in that building? Or other buildings? I mean, most places, most big companies have designated parking.
Yeah, and a permit, like this is your permit.
Well, so what is what's her little map she's got there? Does it have?
Is this the most recent one, Jim?
What date is it?
Jim, that's the most recent I have.
No, close.
Oh, okay.
So why are y'all getting rid of the parking?
Getting rid of the parking?
Yeah, the green space in the back.
That's,
So those are two completely different projects. One of them is the Vital Village project, and
I'm
this.
talking about this project. Why is this project, I was asking them, why are they getting rid of their parking area?
No one's getting rid of their parking areas.
How many parking spaces will there be behind the parking lot?
Kelly's confusing.
On your lane.
He didn't say he's getting.
The last count was around 22,
That's owned by now.
maybe more. I
What
can't,
proof do we have of that?
you don't, because there
It's
hasn't
just
been a
you
one,
saying
there hasn't been, I'd like to finish, Ben. There's a meeting on Thursday with Tim and Pam and their staff to go over the rear parking lots, talk about what their needs are. You have a civil engineer who's been working on the site, getting boundaries, making sure everything's correct and accurate. We've been through 6 or 7 iterations, changes and adjustments, trying to do this, trying to do that. Move the playground, move the this, move the that. And so until that conversation happens, then PM brings that to its board, it won't be final. It's a negotiation, which is what we're doing with it. Pam's not here to speak for herself, so I'm not gonna do that.
Would you happen to have any idea of how many spaces would be gained from combining those two lots, if it did happen?
I'm not sure how to address this without making it look or feel like I'm being evasive, but until Tim has been the lead with Pam, who's the executive director. We've had 6 or 7 shots at this thing. I say a number in public, and then it hangs me up later. There'll be an appropriate time when we'll bring in, as soon as we can, a site plan, turn that into the village, turn that into the town zoning administrator and show it. I can tell you that we're adding parking spaces, net parking spaces. That's very clear, and that's a fact.
And that back lot would be used for employees of the building?
Correct. Yeah. And the discussion, not the decision, but the discussion has been with Pam. The executive director of Notch suggested to Tim that we take the fence down that's in the middle and join the parking lots together. That's a fact. Not a judgment, it's a fact. We weren't doing-
I interject,
Sorry, Ben.
that's not a fact.
Sorry, Ben.
That's hearsay,
We're
just as
gonna let
good as
Jim
my
finish.
hearsay. She did not say that.
That's a fact. And then, because of that, that changed a whole lot of things. And then when we met with the bunks following that, we didn't understand what each other either wanted or was willing to accept. for the record and for a fact, that driveway access point that cuts through the Pearly lot that goes out onto Archambault Street, neither Sandy Murphy, sorry, I got my Sandy's mixed up, nor the attorney were able to find any record of that anywhere. It gets mentioned, it gets cited, but there's no piece of paper that defines that whole access point. So it's a combination of the bunks, the Pearlies, the bats, then back to the bunks again, because a fact is what is that roadway that travels from the fence between Pearly and Bunks land is lawn. It's just land. It's used like a driveway, but it's just land. There's no deed anywhere that says this, that, or the other thing. Each of those property owners, those 4 property owners, each owns the middle of the road. Okay, that's common, and I got that from the town clerk who did the research for us on that, and it was verified by Sandy as well.
I am a little concerned about that being closed off, because even though there's no record of it anywhere, it is common practice, it gets used a lot. And what happens, I mean, when you can't access that anymore? I mean,
it doesn't matter to these guys.
What is it? He's talking about on Archambault Street, which is where Ace is, there's like a roadway that cuts through, that can take you to Main Street. And it does get used a lot, it's been there since my husband's grandfather. Yeah. But, and also, I liked David's idea of the designated parking spaces that even though according to the plan, there'll be more parking spaces created, but isn't enough. So that we are still gonna be able to get our deliveries on Main Street. We have a tractor trailer that comes in once a week with our biggest delivery of the week. We have other trucks that pull on Main Street because that's our only point of access for deliveries. And so, you know, there's that aspect of the retailers too. And it's the same with the businesses across the street, the grocery store. They get more than one tractor trailer delivery. And I don't know how often you guys get one, but anyway.
Go ahead.
So I just want to say, I don't want to dwell on the Opera House parking lot, but we've been over there for many hours this summer. And I'm going to say that most of that lot is open, most of the time. And, you know, I don't see how we can all expect to park directly in front of a store that we want to visit.
Right, like how often do we go down to St. Albans? We'll take that for example because it's come up in conversation tonight. How often have we gone down there to visit a business on Main Street and not been able to find parking? And they have a garage there, so it's not uncommon in busy downtown areas to not have parking. But yeah, there is lots back there. I kind of want to get a feel for how we're thinking if this project is going to benefit us if the parking situation is resolved. And I guess that's where we have to go from here. But.
So, when I came tonight, not as a paid advocate or anything like that, I'm here because I live in the village. I have a business in the village, not on Main Street, of course. And I agree, like parking is definitely probably, you know, in my mind, one of the #1 issues with this. I'm hoping it can be resolved because I think it would be a shame to not see something happen with that building, to have it just sit there empty. And when you drive up our Main Street and you see that empty building, like what does that say to you? You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't even feel good. Like, we do have great businesses on Main Street and I frequent those businesses, but you want people to drive through and be like, hey, let's stop here, let's visit. You know, the daycare sounds like it's gonna be in the back, like they're trying to have retail space in the front. If they can improve, you know, that building, we can bring more people working in town. I mean, I don't see how that can be a bad thing if the parking can be resolved. I just think it would be a shame to not approve, you know, if that piece can be taken care of, to not approve something like this to better that downtown.
I second that, and I think it would be a shame if we can't all come together and try to understand how we can solve the parking problem and let this project go forward.
So my one thought though with the comparison to St. Albans is when you're going to our main street, no one is going to park over by the Opera House. Like if you are going to, you're just not. In the middle of winter, I mean, if you can't get a spot right in front of the liquor store, it's not gonna happen. So I just don't think Enosburg is at a place that is comparable to St. Albans yet. And I think that's important to remember when having these conversations. I think it's 10 years away, maybe 5 years away, but I just think that's really important to remember to ask people right now to go there, to me is not Enosburg, not yet, anyway, with that.
Okay. My suggestion was to have people that are gonna spend 8 hours a day or more on Main Street have designated parking somewhere other than Main Street.
Yeah.
That's how I understood your comment too.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I know, I agree completely, yeah.
That's all.
I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
If I'm gonna shop on Main Street, I wanna be able to park close. If I have to park on the park, that's, you know, I had to park in front of the cemetery and walk down or go to the flower shop or whatever. Like, that parking space could definitely be an overflow, and it would be, I would think, up to the supervisory union or whoever has office space in there to say to their employees, if you can't park here, like, that's where you park. And it's
How would they?
It's mandatory, how,
Yeah,
we're
to
not gonna
enforce
get
it.
mandatory.
You know, look at people that work, look at, because they're employees, and you say, that's where you park. I
How
mean,
would
if I'm an
they, how would
employee,
they know? How would he know?
how would you know if an employee is
He would
parking
know
where
only
they're
like
supposed
if
to?
we called him or something every day.
I mean, as an employee, if someone tells me this is where you park when you work here, all right, that's where I would
It's like
park. I
a
mean, maybe
teacher.
that's just me, I don't know.
It does get out on the school board, you were constantly getting calls on which kids were parking where they shouldn't be parking.
Right.
So the community does police, and certainly that information would come back.
And that's not an uncommon practice. I believe UVM Medical Center does something similar. And they have a shuttle program and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
We're not using that, but same idea.
Right. Go ahead.
So I'm Morgan Dale, I'm the business manager for Franklin Northeast, and I'm not a resident, and I don't know what your rules are about non-residents speaking, so I just want to be sensitive to it.
Yeah, I think this is just a public hearing, so.
So I'll give you a little bit of background on our bid process and our potential move to Pearly Block. As a school district, we're required to bid out when we're leasing a building, so we went through that process in the spring. We had 3 bids come in. The FCIDC bid was the one that we chose as the most responsive. I won't go into a lot of details, but part of that bid, the packet that they presented to us, included 12 to 15 on-site off-street parking spots, 2 of which are handicap accessible. So we expect to see that when we see the final plans. Those will not be, they will not be able to count the ones that are on the street. I would say in a normal day, we probably have about 12 people at any given time in our office. There are times when we have trainings in our office and we do have an overflow of folks. We would certainly be willing to tell people to park at the Opera House. To Shauna's point, I don't know that we have the capacity to police that. We can certainly keep reinforcing that, but it strikes me that if you have 1 hour or 2 hour parking on the street, that takes care of the problem as long as you have somebody doing occasional enforcement of them. And I'm happy to try to answer any questions on the process or what we're expecting when we're doing it. Yeah, I don't want to take a lot of your time.
So those 15 spaces that you're expecting to see in the final project, is that for anyone that works in the building, or is that specifically for you?
Specifically for us. So yeah, I don't know if there's some things carved out for residents or daycare. That was just for the supervisor.
Just a couple things. Certainly with Enosburg high school teachers and elementary school teachers being feeders who would come to training at the supervisory union, it would be hopeful that they could maybe walk or keep their parking spot at the school and come over. I just a couple things. I know that we're not talking about this, but I think that when we had the walkability expert come a couple years ago, it's a goal that we would promote a culture where, and an ease of walking our sidewalks where it isn't a huge ask to ask somebody to park a little ways away, because our traffic is calmed, and so people don't feel like they're gonna get hit by a car when they cross the road. And like, I respect what you're saying, Enosburg is not St. Albans, and we can't expect people to like park, across the park to walk to Twigs or whatever, but by the same token, I think it's an important goal that we work toward having a walkable village where people don't have to fear for their car, in the Opera House potholes, or, any of that, that we would keep people walking in the village. And I just also really struggle, I want to echo what people have said, I struggle for advocating for empty storefronts. We have to find a way to make parking work, because looking at an empty storefront for another decade, because this is the sticking point, just makes me sad. I really struggle to say we would rather look at nothing for the next decade, because we let these people with energy go by. And the last thing I want to say is just that the Franklin Northeast Supervisory Union people are us. Like, if we ask nicely, like, they're small business owners, they care about, I don't think that pointing at them as the bad guy. I think if you ask nicely, I hope that the vast majority of Franklin Northeast Supervisory Union employees would park where you ask them to, because you said, hey, I own a coffee shop and you parking here is a detriment to my way of life. I would really hope that someone who's our neighbor would take that and follow the directions. I'm not saying that everyone's perfect, but these aren't, people driving in from Burlington. They're our neighbors. They live next door. That's all I have to say.
Can I respond to that? Well, one thing, if there's apartments there, if you're unloading your groceries in the winter or summer, it's really implausible to think that you should have to park at the Opera House to do that. And another is that not everybody's capable. Like, some people need to park in accessible places. And as a village resident, I walk a ton, and I'm fine with that. But also, like, it's a difference between having walkable sidewalks, which I love, and then having permanent parkers on the street. And, the FNESU people, their parking will be taken care of as part of their deal. So that's not really the problem, but, our dumpster has to be accessed through the parking where a lot of our neighbors park currently, and trying to nicely ask people not to park somewhere is still a confrontation that I personally have no interest in pursuing on a daily basis,
That brings up the question of the overnight permanent parkers associated with the apartments. So 8 apartments, let's just say everybody has 1 car, but they can have as many cars as they want. So are they gonna overnight park in the Opera House and leave it there? Is that cool for snow removal and stuff? Or where are the up to 16, let's just get crazy with it, or let's just take it down to 12 cars. Where are the overnight parkers for the apartments that are paying rent to the Franklin County Industrial Development? Where are they gonna park overnight permanently?
Well, they're currently occupied. So,
Occupied where? What do you
the
mean?
apartments are fully occupied
Where
right
do
now.
they park
Where-
now?
Because a lot of them don't have vehicles.
There is a parking place.
There's a
but
parking lot,
The
yes.
plan is to get rid of it.
Well, they want to get rid of that parking
Yeah,
lot.
that's
Well,
the-
they need
I-
to work this out.
No.
Clarify.
No.
That's not the case.
That's not factual, no.
So there's some misinformation
We're-
happening with parking places.
But that's the problem, is we don't have information. Like, is this meeting, the trustees have already signed off on this, right? Like, you signed a letter to,
The paperwork's
I believe it's right here.
It's here. They have approved applying for the grant.
Well, and don't forget, this will go through, if I may, sorry, this will go through the DRB where you'll see the site plan. And that's when the parking and all of those very specific issues will be addressed. And that's when the site plan, we don't have the site plan yet because those are the negotiations that are happening. It still has to go through your zoning administrator and that whole permitting process. So the site plan will have to go through before the DRB, and there will be a whole nother public comment that is separate from tonight.
And I would think the retailers would be actively involved in the parking problem or issue.
I want to be a parking enforcer.
Not to be
I
an
already am.
enforcer, to
It's
be
a bummer.
part of the plan so that people
Yeah.
agree on where people will park who have an apartment, where people will park who are employed by FNESU, where people will park who are retail people, and the space in front of their stores need to be open so people can come and go. Your store and there's some stores.
Could we be guaranteed that, like to have a meeting when it's at that step, so that all of the people on Main Street?
Those meetings are all
Yeah, you're
public.
gonna have, so they're gonna have to submit a site plan review, and that's gonna have to go through a public, like she was just explaining, it'll have to go through a public similar to this, and the DRB will review all of that information.
So I just wanted to make sure I understood. So this grant is being applied for, the trustees have said, yes, it's gonna be applied for. If you get it, if you don't get it, that's kind of like the next thing to determine whether or not the building can get purchased. And then from there, everything goes through zoning, so there's the DRB. The DRB could ultimately shut it down if they didn't approve it. I mean, is that?
It's not,
Is that,
yeah, I mean,
like,
it has to,
where it
yeah, it's not a personal, like, opinion matter, they have to reference the village bylaws.
Right.
And, you know, whether those meet those standards, and they yay or nay it from there, so.
And so, kind of like when Tractor Supply wanted to come in, if they had said, no, we don't approve this, then they
Right,
wouldn't
if
have
it's, yeah, if
come.
there's something, right, exactly, if something doesn't meet.
So that's kind of the
meet
ultimate
the
process.
bylaws.
And those are all public.
Right, yes, yes.
So I understand.
Susie earlier tried to introduce the idea, are there other concerns against submitting this application? And I haven't heard any yet. Let's assume that's true, there aren't any others. I would encourage those who are in opposition, as well as those who are pushing the project, to get together now and start working on these details that we don't have answers for, so that they're ready for the DRB if we get the grant, rather than continuing to go at each
You
other.
don't have to fight.
I don't think there's any opposition from those in favor of this project, that we have a good plan, and we have a good parking plan that responds to everybody's interest, particularly the merchants. We could start doing that right now.
So the way that stands right now, basically, if we can come up with more parking spaces in the new proposed plan, then there will be new employees of the new building. Would we all be in agreement to go forward with this project?
I don't have a problem, I mean, as I said earlier, I am excited about what will be happening to the building, but I think you have to be realistic, there's just so much land space available. And, you know, is there going to be a guarantee that every new employee that's going to be working there is going to be, will have a parking space, so it doesn't impact what's already going on Main Street?
And the residents.
I have a non-parking question. So what happens with a lot of these projects that we've seen, St. Albans House, different places where there's a lot of promises that come forward, like this is a promise that there's going to be a daycare in there, and that there's going to be retail space, and that there's, so what if that doesn't happen? And there's really a strong, I feel like there's only about a 20% chance that this daycare will ever exist, to be honest, as just a person who sees this kind of stuff happen all the time, that it will, so what happens to the money if, when do you make the call to say, you know, Jim, Elizabeth, just like the industrial park lots that you control, this is a dud, guys. You haven't been able to put any asses in the seats. What, is there a timeline for when we could get the money back from them?
So since we're not promising any funds directly from the village, we would not have to be receiving any funds since there's no money, taxpayer money tied up. John can probably clarify further on that.
Yeah, the grant application funds are to go towards the purchase of the building and the renovations of the building. There's nothing in there that would require a specific type of business to go into the space or any final, do you disagree?
Sorry. You have to meet a national objective, and it's LMI, so low to medium income.
Yeah.
So we are saying that 53% of the kids, the families of the kids who will go to this child care center, which means there has to be
So
a child care center.
So you're writing that
Writing that in,
into the grant
53%
application,
have to
that
be
it's not just
below.
the renovations,
Right.
it's also,
Right. To meet-
okay,
yeah,
I
yes.
wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, to meet the national.
So you're
because-
actually writing the daycare center
Into-
into
yes,
the grant
because-
application and requesting that the funds from the VCDP grant
Well, as part
will
of,
also cover costs on the daycare
as,
center.
well,
Okay,
because it
I
is.
wasn't aware of that.
Because it is.
I thought it was just going towards the purchase of the building and the renovations.
It is, with the understanding that 53% of those kids who go to the child care center, that will happen. I mean, to the best of our ability, we have
Okay, so
everybody.
you understand then, Elizabeth, you are actually obligating, committing the funds to the daycare center?
Yes,
then?
yes.
Okay, so
That is part of the application, is that we
Okay,
had to meet
so-
them LMI.
Ben's got a valid question then. What happens if the daycare center doesn't happen or you can't?
Then
meet the
FCIDC
load of-
returns the funds.
Okay.
That's 5 years?
It will
We-
happen.
We've heard a back channel conversation about how the rent is gonna get jacked up after 5 years because the daycare is the redheaded stepchild of this project. It's a 5-year limit, right, for the seed, so as long as you can get the thing in there for 5 years, it doesn't, after that, it doesn't matter, right? I think that's the timing.
I have not heard anything about, one, the rent going up, or two, that it's 5 years.
Oh, that's just a discussion that I heard from a meeting that Jim had with Champlain Chevrolet.
So if I can just ask a question that relates to that. Will there be anything in the deed that says there will have to be a child care center there and how that child care center will operate? Is that gonna be part of the deed?
Do you want to take that?
No,
It's not gonna be part of that deed?
no.
But it will be part of the, correct me if I'm wrong, part of the DRB application will be the mixed use that includes the child care center.
But the
That's
DRB
correct.
application would come after the funds are approved?
No, it should be happening in concert. So we're going to go to the board, the VCDB board, on November 4th. We'll get a decision, I believe it's mid-January, so I would anticipate you would be before the DRB before then.
Jesse, yeah, Jesse's here. I met with Jesse last week, the week before, I don't remember anymore, but what is it now? So by the 15th of September, I'm gonna add to the application, which is fundamentally about historic preservation issues. And as I said earlier, we've hired a consultant who does this. We've got our letter from the National Park Service telling us that we can get our federal tax credits if we follow the program. That program is more stringent than your downtown regulations, but we're gonna just paraphrase that, and I'm gonna give that to Jesse. It fundamentally won't change the application, which we turned in good faith, thought was complete. There's questions, we will fill those answers in. And by then, we will have a locked-in site plan, if you will.
But and I guess just as another piece, there is funding available starting in October to help fund the child care center, because we are committed to child care, because that is such a need in Franklin County, as we talked, that there will be a child care facility there.
But there's nothing in the deed saying that there's gonna be a child care center there, so, I mean, as far as the ownership of the property goes, I think Ben's right, where, 5 years down the road, you guys could say, yeah, we're not gonna have a child care center anymore, or you might even, you just said 53%, you might say, hey, you know what, let's pare that down to only a capacity of 4 kids instead of 40. We'll leave them a little room here, and we'll have 3 of them as low income just to be able to satisfy it.
Pardon me.
I'm wondering.
Pardon me.
No, Jim, please don't cut me off. I'm wondering, why is there not something that's going to be put in the deed? If that's the contingent, if the child care center is the contingent portion of this to get the funding to buy the property, then why is there nothing in the deed to ensure that that's actually what's gonna happen.
With the lending requirement.
That sounds good.
The deed is forever.
Does Ben's deed require that he have a coffee shop?
I didn't get a $500 million public money grant based on promises that I made about my coffee shop. And these guys are making promises right now to us. No evidence.
It has to do with hope.
Jim, I have a background with funding and supporting early childhood education. Some of it here in Vermont after I retired, helping with St. Albans 15, 20 years ago. The rest of it in other places. Jim asked me to sit with him and the director, and I was showed what appeared to me to be a quite detailed plan of operational design, which is very important to be effective with the kids, a very clear staffing and outcomes statement. Actually, I had some questions about the outcomes. And a total budget, which I suggested to them requires some discussion. Jim may be mad at me for saying this tonight, but that planning, it goes on, and it is going on as it used to. I worked for 4 or 5 different foundations in my life. And at this point in any process, helping a group, this group is as far along as I would expect anybody to be in such a process at this stage. If they get the money, and I'm particularly impressed tonight about the DRB, because it seems to me that's where these questions will hit the road, and if they don't work, that's what our review board is there for. It's not for you guys, I would think, to decide what the review board would accept or not accept at some other point that we're not at yet. So
But the parking would come up in the DRB as well. And
Yeah,
it would be resolved with the people that are involved.
and whether they're committed, I don't know about other places in town where people have gotten outside money that they've had to commit in their deed to what they were gonna use the building for forever.
Might have a silly question, but so if there are retail shops in the front, where does that money go for the rent? Like, who does that go to?
Goes to the owner,
Who is,
Franklin County Industrial Development
Should the
Corporation.
purchase go through, it would be FCIDC.
okay, so if there were
Yes.
apartment buildings upstairs and they're generating a profit, it
Yes.
goes to that, so
Yes.
not, okay.
And we are a not-for-profit, so I'm not gonna, I don't know enough to speak about where that money would go.
Okay.
But do keep in mind, we are a not-for-profit, so that creates a certain circumstance.
And, sorry, and
Go ahead.
just that, and then some of the income would go towards offsetting costs to the
Okay.
childcare center, which allows to keep expenses down and wages up.
Yes.
Correct?
And those numbers will be presented
Yes.
somewhere as part of the
Yeah.
plan?
Can I just put it to let people know, there's the dire thing about this being empty space. It should be known that this building it didn't go up for sale to the public. So, to act like this, that it's abandoned and that only Chaz, but it never, what if Chaz just tried to put the building up for sale and see if someone buys it? I know that sounds crazy to a nonprofit person, but to a regular business person, doesn't that seem reasonable? I know it's beyond private, we know your argument that it's beyond private saving, that it has to be a
No,
government
and don't
project.
make my arguments for me, because I actually do
That's
this.
Jim's argument, we've heard his argument that way before.
Your attitude, Ben, is very bad right now, and it's not fair to all of us here.
Okay.
Is that not helpful to the
And
community?
we love you, and we love your store, and we are here to care about our town.
I do.
And what you're doing is very animosity building.
I do economic development for Swanton, and we have a vacant storefront. And it's been for sale for several months. It is not easy to sell a commercial storefront. And I don't remember, Jim may remember if FCIDC approached Charles Mraz or vice versa. I believe we approached them because we had the idea that it could be mixed use. It could be a child care center. It could become something because it has been vacant. It has been for rent. nobody seemed to be interested so we took the opportunity to renovate the building in a fabulous place in your downtown, and we hope to make it work. And I think honestly, and this is my little Mary Sunshine moment that I don't have very often, if parking is your issue, we can work around that. You want actually parking to be an issue because that means you have a thriving downtown. Can we work this out? Yes, that's what DRB is for, and I think we will come up with a site plan that may take a tweak or two based on public opinion, or you may be misunderstanding the bylaws because nobody's perfect, but I think that the parking is a big problem, but it's probably one of the easiest solved problems. I truly think it is. So that's...
I didn't hear any negative feedback when I made the, I guess the question of if there was more spaces than employees, and it didn't seem like anybody here had an issue with that. So I mean, I guess that's a goal. As many as or more spots than employees, I think sounds reasonable to most of the members of the community.
Cheryl, sorry if I was speaking animosity. My fault.
Just one quick question on that. You said that the parking should be the easiest to solve. Maybe we can do that before this gets submitted so that the public can give their public input before this gets presented to the state. If that is indeed the easiest thing to solve.
So the application is due in a week, so that won't get resolved. But before the DRB, we can certainly, take that to.
Well, when it was due, that doesn't have anything to do with Ben or Kirsten. That has everything to do with you scheduling this a week before it was due. If you truly wanted public comment on this, it would have been 90 days ago.
The grant,
so that you could do some of this stuff.
We actually got access to the grant 2 weeks ago. And I was out with a respiratory illness. So that's why we're actually having a special hearing, is because this was literally the only day we could do it, because it was just such a tight time frame to get access to the application.
So you started writing this 2 weeks ago?
I did. It was the week of August 20th.
And it's a living document.
It is a living.
It
is almost, yeah, but I did start this 2 weeks ago.
Can I just get some clarification, Greg? Sorry, most...
My opinion.
Sorry, go ahead, Heather.
If you could have gotten this parking thing approved, or at least given time for the public to truly have a comment period so that some of these could be resolved, rather than just, okay, we did our public comment, check that off the list, now we can send it off to the state.
Well, and to be fair, parking is an issue, and I don't mean to minimize the concerns. I do think once people put their heads together, it is an easy fix. The parking part of this, keep in mind, this is for the purchase of the building and for some renovations. So a lot of the details as to the site plan, the floor plans, and all of that, that's still a living document as well, and that will change versus what I submitted. So again, the process with the DRB is when I think we can come together and say, okay, here's what we're thinking, here's where.
But that's after you've gotten $500,000 or something.
Well, no, we won't know until it will present in November, and hopefully these issues, I would hope you'd be before the DRB before then.
Once we have a submitted plan, I mean, it has to be acted on within 30 days. So
Right.
I mean, it has to go before the DRB by
Right.
then. So.
And if the DRB has an issue with the site plan, we may be dead in water not accepting the $500,000 when it's offered in January. That is an option. The village could say, look, we can't get we can't, the parking won't work, and they don't take the funds. That is an option.
So just, I want to add a little bit, 2 points that was just made. One is, this has been on trustees' agendas more than once, and we have had some people occasionally at meetings, but it wasn't a public hearing directly for it, but there was definitely opportunity for public to join trustees' meetings and discuss this, or email the trustees. We do all have email addresses, or you can contact a village employee. And our every other, the second and third Thursdays, we're here. And the other one is, the timeline that Elizabeth was talking about is very common with grants. I am a professional grant writer. Not all the details are ever worked out at the beginning of a grant, it's not expected to be, and it's very common for the actual grant application to not be available until very shortly before you write the grant. So there's been a lot of back work because Elizabeth and others who are also presumably writing for this grant in other areas, there's information on there on what you're going to need to apply for the grant, but the actual minute details are very rarely released to the people applying until a couple of weeks or about a month before. It's tedious and irritating.
A couple weeks in a month or a month before would be, a month would be 4 times longer than what the public has now, which is, you said a week before it's due.
But I'm not saying, what I just said was not knowing what Elizabeth's timeline is. I'm saying that it's very common for grants to have a very small window of releasing the actual details of this year's grant application because they do change from year to year.
I understand that.
Do we get all the comments and questions? Do you have one? No? Okay. If nobody has any further questions or comments, did you have something?
No, I don't want to jump over where you were going, but I was hoping you would, the resolution and the letter.
To read it?
No, but they need to be approved and signed.
Well, that would be the next step. If we're concluded the comment section, then the board needs to decide whether they're going to sign the resolution, and then there's an accompanying letter to Patrick Sheld, who works at VCDP, that is also being sent as part of the application on behalf of the Board of Trustees.
And those are the two that you saw at the last meeting. I made the two minor changes.
It's the same thing that Elizabeth brought last week to your board meetings.
Yeah, so we just need those, if you're so inclined.
Those would need to be signed by the board. I think you want them tonight if possible, is that correct?
So if there are no further questions or comments, I will hear a motion from the board to accept the grant application and the letter of resolution, right?
It's just a resolution, yeah.
Either or both.
I move we accept both.
I'll second.
All right, Sandy at the first, Heather with the second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay.